Sawa.
Haya, sawa.
Music itaanza nikiclick play. So is that the timer?
No, they'll come and tell us. So listen. How's my volume?
Camera person.
Exactly.
Good morning, all of you, and welcome to this webinar from wherever you are. My name is Beth Njeri, the Digital Content Officer at World Animal Protection. Today, we train our focus on how we can protect animals during disasters. Leading us in this discussion is Dr. Judy Kimaru, Campaign Manager Animals in Disasters at World Animal Protection. Judy is an animal welfare enthusiast with over 23 years experience in disaster management. Throughout her presentation, she'll take us through how we can protect animals caught up in disasters such as floods, drought, earthquakes, and even cyclones. Let's take this conversation global through the hashtag Animals Matter AF. Our Twitter handle is at Move the World AF, as previously shown in the last slide. Just before we kick off, we'll play a short 55 seconds video showing our work responding in disasters in the last 55 years. After that, we'll pop up 2 poll questions just to gauge your understanding on disaster preparedness. This will be up for 1 minute on your screen, so kindly ensure to select your answers quickly. The results will be shared in the course of the webinar, so please consider sticking around to the end. We'll also have a Q&A session after the presentation, so type in your thoughts and questions in the provided Q&A box just below your screen. We'll also have a 10-minute audio question and answer session. If you have something you'd like to ask verbally, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you when the time comes. Shortly after the webinar, we'll have a 15-minute session with journalists. So if you're here and representing any media house, kindly stay behind. Finally, should you be using a device that is showing the panelist view in a small box on your screen, kindly drag the split line towards the side that will ensure that you have a full view of the panelist, who is Judy in this case. It is our hope that you will enjoy this webinar and find it useful within your communities and even your career. Now on to the video and the poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome everybody to today's Prepvet launch. It's my privilege to take you through what you can expect if you do the online course and what it entails to actually do disaster response. Throughout my presentation, I'll be covering the following areas. We will first of all look at what are the definitions involved in disaster response. We'll talk a bit about the history and the objectives of Prepvet, why Prepvet, what you can expect from the Prepvet course, and finally, we'll talk about how you can register for this course. So without further ado, let's get on and talking about some of the definition. Now, when you go through the Prepvet course, you will find that it starts off by going into some details about the definition of what it means to do disaster risk reduction and disaster management. And one of the definitions I want you to take home is the definition we use in our sector, the animal resource sector, when it comes to animal disasters. You'll find that disasters and emergencies are used interchangeably depending on which part of the world you are. So in our sector, which is the animal sector, when we talk about dealing with animals in disasters, what we are talking about is animal disease emergencies, where animals are the disaster, and animal disaster emergencies, where animals find themselves in the disaster. Now, the first one, which is animal disease emergencies, these are normally diseases that affect animals and are of public health concern, and they're diseases that we say are zoonotics. That means they can jump from animals to people. And we're concerned about these diseases because they have similar impact to a natural disaster. If one animal gets sick and infects a herd, it could infect a whole area and a whole country and devastate the livelihoods and the food security of that country. So as veterinarians and as farmers and animal owners, we are very concerned about animal disease emergencies. The second category is what we call animal disaster emergencies. Now, this is where animals, just like us, get caught up in natural disasters. Disasters like droughts. We have various hazards that can affect animals. And what we find is that animals get caught up in these disasters. And one of the disasters that is that happens in areas with mountains are volcanic eruptions. And volcanic eruptions, electricity going off in big production units like poultry and fish units can be disastrous for animals. Another disaster that is quite common are droughts. Now, droughts in Africa, according to FAO, account for 86% of the disaster loss and damage in the sector. So this is huge for us. It's huge for us in sub-Saharan Africa to deal with the effects and the impacts of drought. Another hazard that is quite common following drought is actually floods. You find that every year we have floods. We enter flood seasons. And in the flood seasons, our animals are really affected and we lose quite a few. And floods, it's not just floods, we have cyclones, we have mudslides, and we have landslides that accompany flood events. And so we as veterinarians, we as farmers need to be able to handle these sort of situations. In all disasters, either a disaster can start as an animal disease and then lead up to a much more complicated situation, or sometimes you start with a natural hazard like a flood event that leads to another disease. A good example is that when we have heavy rains like we are having right now in Kenya and many other parts of Africa, you can end up having diseases like Rift Valley fever. And so we have a complex disaster and we need to be able to handle that and deal with that. In all these situations, in order for us to work closely with farmers and animals and equip ourselves, we recognize that the first responders to disasters are actually animal owners. And this course is also very relevant for animal owners so that they can know what to do for their animals before, during, and after a disaster. And for veterinarians, para-professionals, people working in this sector, we need to understand what it means to protect animals, to reduce the risk of animals so that they can survive better during disaster events and the communities can thrive and maintain and secure their livelihoods. So one of the other terminologies that you will come across in this Prepvet course is disaster management. Now, what is disaster management? Disaster management is a set of protocols. It's actually what we call the disaster management cycle, where we start by putting in measures that prevent the disaster. We also prepare for the disaster just before a disaster happens, right after early warnings are issued. Let's say your meteorological department tells you that there'll be heavy rains. We want to begin to prepare our animal, our farm, our homes where we have pets, so that they are better prepared to resist or to be resilient during the disaster. Then there's the actual response, where veterinarians come and help to save the lives of animals. And finally, we want to recover. We want to recover from a disaster event and make sure that our systems are resilient for future events. And this is what we call the disaster management cycle. And you come across this terminology within the course itself. Another terminology that is often spoken about in all sectors and is very relevant for our sector as well is disaster risk reduction. Now, what is disaster risk reduction? You will find that it's explained in the course, but just to go a bit into details about what it means, disaster risk reduction is actually understanding what are the underlying causes that are causing our animals to be predisposed to getting affected by disasters. Now, this can be at the animal level, they can be at the farmer's level, they can be at the institutional level, they can be in the infrastructure we use like markets, our road infrastructure. We need to be looking at all these things. On top of all that, we need to be looking at the policies and the plans that we have in place to be able to deal with disasters. And another terminology that confuses people is vulnerability. Vulnerability really is talking about what makes an animal vulnerable to a disaster. Now, we know a lot of vulnerability for animals is actually as a result of we animal owners. What we know, what we don't know, how we treat our animals actually predisposes them to disasters. So the take home here is every time vulnerability in and around the animal meets a hazard, we will have an animal disaster. So let's go right now into how did we get where we were? What is the history of Prepvet? As you saw from the earlier video, World Animal Protection has been involved in disaster management for the past 55 years. And over that period, we've learned quite a lot. One of the major things that we have learned is that people's lack of knowledge at all levels, at the animal owners level, at the veterinarians level, at government officials levels, has contributed a lot to the reason why we lose a lot of animals during disasters. So having been involved in direct disaster response from Costa Rica all the way to New Zealand, we realized that we needed to contribute to the knowledge space within this sector and help animal responders to better deal with disasters. So in 2008, a program called Veterinary Emergency Response Unit was developed. And this program specifically targeted veterinarians and animal health technicians. And it was delivered within universities and middle-level colleges that train professional cadre. It started in Costa Rica, went to Colombia, it's been rolled out in Mexico, and in Africa, it's been rolled out in Kenya, in the University of Nairobi, where we have a Center of Disaster Excellence for Animals. What we learned is that it's a slow process. If I give an example, Kenya alone, we have 300 students who have gone through this course, and that has taken about 7 years to reach there. So it's slow to build up the capacity, very important work. We are not going to be replacing that work, but we realized in order to reach the veterinarians who are currently in service and those who are practicing and those who have to help their farmers, we had to upgrade this course to be online and more accessible, not just to veterinarians, like I said, or technicians, but also to farmers. We also upgraded the information that was in this course, and hence Prepvet was born. And Prepvet was born sometime in 2011, 2012, and it was a course that was undertaken in Spanish, mainly in Latin America. And lessons learned from that, we realized we needed to upscale this course. There was a lot of interest in this course across the globe. So what we did is that late last year, we translated the Spanish version into English and Portuguese. And that's why today we are launching the Prepvet in English, because it's now accessible to English-speaking Africa, and also Portuguese-speaking Africa can get this course. And maybe in the future, we will also translate it to French. So with the Prepvet course, it actually constitutes of 4 pillars, of 4 main sections and 13 modules. The course has proved to be very, very popular and successful all across the world. And in fact, the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Office of Asia, the Training and Education Unit, what we call the UNDRR, Onea Getty, has endorsed this course. And only May this year, the OIE office, regional office for Latin America, has requested that all 700 veterinarians under that region take the course within the next 2 months, because that is how important and that is how useful this course is for especially the technical staff. The results from the poll that we have just done are up on your screen. And from the results, it's quite clear that, yes, quite a few of you have been engaged in, found yourselves by default being involved in an animal disaster. And what the results are showing us is that not all of you felt very comfortable or confident that you had the right skills to help your animals. And if that is the case, I want to assure you you're in the right place. And I want to encourage you to do this course, because this course has been designed for you. It's been designed to help you help your animals during disasters. So what can you expect when you do the course? Now, we have introduced a mascot, and her name is called Maya. And Maya will guide you through this course. And what she shall do is that she shall check your knowledge. As you do each module, she will present for you a challenge that she's facing. Maybe she has broken her leg and she wants you to deal with that in the situation of a disaster. And the way we've designed this course is to check after each module that you've understood the concept. And thereafter, there'll be a set of questions that you will need to answer before you can move into the next module. At the end of the 13 modules, you will receive a certificate. You will receive a generic certificate. And for those who are in the Africa region, we will give you a detailed certificate because we're able to see who has finished. Now, going into some details, the first section covers disaster risk reduction and management, where you will go through some terminology issues like we have done earlier. It then also talks about the role of veterinarians and the academia, and to some extent also the government in what is their role in disaster risk reduction. The second pillar talks about climate change. You know how important climate change is. We can see the impacts of climate change in Southern Africa with cyclones hitting those countries in the Mozambique Channel almost every other year. We can see the impact of wildfires in the Amazon, in Australia late last year. And we are not prone to the impacts of climate change. And even in our region, we are seeing our disasters and our floods intensifying. So the second module goes into details. What is climate change? And for us as veterinarians, what is climate change adaptation? What should we be doing at our farm level, at our institutional level, and around the infrastructure affecting animals? How should we be advising our farmers? How should we be developing our policies and our plans to mitigate and prepare our systems to be disaster risk ready? The third module really now goes into what does it take to do a disaster response for animals. We go into some details about securing the field. How do we ensure that the environment is secure for not just the staff who will be working, but also the animals? We introduce, and probably it's only this course that has this, what we call the Animal Emergency Incident Command Systems. I'll speak to this a bit later, but this is very unique, and it is the bread and butter of what makes a disaster team able to respond to disasters. Also, the course will take you through how to undertake disaster assessments. It will help you with undertaking what we call mass casualty incidences for veterinary sector, what we call veterinary triage. If you have a situation where a lot of animals get affected by something, maybe even a bomb blast, and you have to choose how to deal with them, this course will take you through that. It will also take you through animal evacuation. What do we do during animal evacuations? How do we deal with companion animals? Companion animals here mean pets, they mean dogs, cats, including our birds, our exotic animals. How do we deal with that? And it touches on another standard that is quite famous in the veterinary sector called the Livestock Emergency Guidelines. And this course in the universities is done alongside with the LEGS course, as we call it, because it is part of equipping the veterinarian to have the full toolkit of what you need to respond. The fourth pillar that you will go into, as you know, we are an animal welfare organization. So we look at how do we ensure that we are undertaking animal welfare compliant disaster responses in the field. What does that mean and what does that look like? So it's very, very important that we are not just rescuing animals, but we are doing so keeping in line with animal welfare standards. So what are the learning outcomes? I just want to mention three. Now you will get very many, but there are three that will be very unique to this course. You will understand the steps it takes to do a response. Now, Prepvet is specifically designed for what we call rapid onset disasters. A rapid onset disaster is like a cyclone, an earthquake, a volcano, things that happen suddenly and we must deal with it. Because we recognize that disaster response teams must be on site to save animals within the first 72 hours. So this is a strength of Prepvet. Slow onset disasters are like drought. Drought, we know it's coming and it takes a long time for the full impact. But fast onset disasters is where the real strength of Prepvet comes. And as a team, you will understand how you should undertake assessments, how you should deploy a team, what you need to do in terms of logistics, equipment, coordination within the first 24 hours. You'll understand what it is a veterinarian team, a veterinary disaster response team does in the field, what it should be doing in the field. You'll understand how to deactivate that particular response because responses are not meant to go on forever. The average response takes between 5 to 15 days and then it's deactivated, and you'll understand how to end that well and go into the next phase, which is actually the recovery phase. Our second learning outcome, and this course touches, but other courses go into detail. I have mentioned this. One of the main roles of veterinarians is to understand how to evacuate animals. I'll give you an example. In some countries, they have early warning for volcanic eruptions. So normally, when you want to evacuate people, once the early warning or once the mountain starts smoking and the officials are telling you it's time to evacuate, it's time to evacuate, you find that you can evacuate people much later, closer to the problem time, depending on what your Richter scale is showing you. But when it comes to evacuating animals, you need to evacuate them much earlier because the logistics of evacuating them, where they're going, how to ensure that they're well registered takes time. So people can remain behind and evacuate much later in a volcanic eruption. So one of the mistakes we have seen during many disasters is that when the disaster happens, authorities and even communities are trying to evacuate themselves and to evacuate their animals at the same time. And that contributes to us losing a lot of animals and animal injuries and even animal abandonment. So the Prepvet goes into some details about that. It also goes into details about what exactly does a veterinarian do when they have an animal. And what we veterinarians do is that we treat animals, we make sure that they are they're not suffering, and that's very important from an animal welfare perspective. Veterinarians also feed animals. They ensure they have the right food, they have water, they have shelter. We set up mobile clinics. We register animals so that we can reunite them with their owners after the disaster, and many other things that a response team does. The third outcome, and I want to spend a bit more time here, is that for the first time we introduce what we call the Animal Emergency Incident Command System. Incident command systems were first used by the military way back before probably most of us were born. And this is really a set of language that allows an active disaster response, or what you'd call a military response, to go into the field, to communicate, to define roles and responsibility. And it also allows these teams to talk to other teams in other sectors that have also been trained under the incident command system. So when we are in the field, for instance, there's a earthquake. When we get onto the scene, because we are trained in incident command systems, we can speak to the military that we find on ground that's trying to also pull out people. We can speak to the fire brigade and the fire managers, because they also use incident command systems. We can speak to the health people who are using incident command system. So it's not only a language that is used to manage and coordinate an active response, it's also used to communicate with other active disaster responses. So this Prepvet actually introduces you to that, and probably in my knowledge, this is probably one of the only courses that does introduce the animal emergency systems. In other courses, we'll go into details about what's the difference between animal emergency and incident command system for an animal disease emergency and one for an animal disaster emergency. But for Prepvet right now, at least you shall come out with that outcome. So there are other added benefits as well to doing the Prepvet. For instance, if you're in Kenya, you will automatically get 30 continuous development points, what we call CPDs, when you finish this course. It takes about 14 hours to go through this course. So our veterinary board, the Kenya Veterinary Board, has assigned 32 CPD points. So I encourage all veterinarians and all para-veterinarians to do this course. In fact, in Latin America, they are currently doing this course and benefiting. So we want to be in par with our global colleagues. I also encourage that if there are anyone on this call who's from other countries like Malawi, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Tanzania, we have been in contact with them, and you're interested in doing this course and also getting CPD courses, CPD points for it, get in touch with myself, and we will get in touch with your board. If you yourself are not part of the board, or can connect us with your local board, and we will talk with them so that they can assign CPD points to anyone who completes the course. You will get a detailed certificate, and like I mentioned, this is a globally standardized training. So veterinarians and paraprofessionals that are trained, if you go to Latin America and you say, I am trained in Prepvet, you will be able, the veterinarians there will know what you've been trained in. If you go to Thailand and say you've been trained in Prepvet, they'll know what you've been trained in. If you go to India, they will know what your training is about. And in fact, in India, most of the states have adopted the Veru and are now moving into the Prepvet. And we have seen in yesteryears in that continent, a lot of people used to get killed during their floods and their monsoon seasons. But in the last 2-3 years, we have seen a huge difference. And I'm sure many of you through the media have seen their rescue teams rescuing both people and animals. And that's as a result of World Animals Protection investment in India for the last 10 years plus, where we have gotten the training to the professionals and the government, and now they are rescuing both their people and their animals, and they have seen a huge reduction in losses and deaths, both for people and animals. So we'd like to further understand, for those especially who have already taken the course, because we run a short pilot, what additional training would you like? In front of you is a poll. It's not really a poll, it's just a set of questions. Please take time to tick all the areas you'd like additional training. Like I mentioned, in this field called disaster risk reduction or disaster management, you can never learn enough. You continually have to add education and training to your practice. So when we understand what you need, we're able to tailor additional training to your needs or direct you where you can get this training. If you're in Kenya, one of our disaster management centers of excellence is the University of Nairobi Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. And going forward with other universities, even in the region, we want to ensure that this course is available to you to do through those platforms. So I hope you had enough time to answer those questions. And if you have any additional questions, you still have a chance to put those questions in the comment box. We are picking them up and we'll answer them at the end of this session. So before I leave the stage, I'd like to encourage you to register for Prepvet immediately after this course. You will receive an email from us with these details that are before you in the screen. But basically, what you will need to do is go to our World Animal Protection website, Africa. You sign up, you look for Prepvet in the titles, you see a link there and you sign up. You'll receive an additional email from us once you've done the initial signing with more details on how to sign up. Please go ahead and register, and then the course is self-running. So you'll be able to do the course. If you have any challenges, technical or otherwise, again, please feel free to get in touch with us, myself. My email is up, and my colleague, Dr. Victor Toroitich, who many of you have already interacted with if you've been part of this course. And copy all your communication to Prepvet, World Animal Protection. Now, we look forward to seeing you in that space. And thank you very, very much for your attention. And I want to hand it over now to Beth so that she can take us through any questions that you may have. And I'll be more than happy to answer them. Beth, over to you.
Thank you, Judy, for that great presentation. Indeed, a lot of questions coming in. Someone is asking, what is Prepvet? Prepvet has been mentioned quite a bit throughout the presentation, but what it exactly means is still a big question for some. We also got an anonymous question asking what prompted Wild Animal Protection to start this course, and is there a payment to undertake this course? Question from Wanza. That's the first set we'll be answering.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I have mentioned, Prepvet is an online course that prepares the veterinarian, it prepares the animal health practitioner. It's also very useful for farmers and animal owners and animal enthusiasts. We know that in this part of the world, we have animals, or we live with animals. We either own them directly, our families own them, or our grandparents or uncles own them. So anybody, which is pretty much most of us, who interacts with animals, this is a very, very useful course. But it has been specifically tailored really to veterinarians and paraprofessionals and animal health handlers. So that is what this course is about. And through the course, you'll be able to learn about disaster risk reduction. You'll be able to learn about disaster management, disaster response, climate change, and all the things that you need to do. The second question is there a cost? I'm very happy to announce, if I didn't say it before, this is absolutely free. Once you've registered and gone through the course, it is free. We are making this resource available to Africa and to the world because we want to see our animals protected. And one of the reasons why World Animal Protection developed this course is because we realized that one of the major reasons, in the top 3 major reasons why animals were dying in disasters and being abandoned or experiencing horrendous injuries and disease is because people did not have the correct knowledge on what to do to protect their animals. Remember, as an animal owner, you are the first responder for that animal. Before a veterinarian comes on the scene, before you can take them to a clinic, you are the first responder for that animal. So if you know what to do, the chances of protecting and saving your animals increases. So we designed the course for two reasons. Number one, we realized that in the veterinary course in universities, disaster management was not taught. Actually, if I give the example of Kenya, disaster management only started being taught in 2011 after we introduced the course Veterinary Emergency Response Unit. So veterinarians who went through the course prior to this did not have disaster management training. And as a result, they were not able to help their clients and other animal owners to disaster mitigate or to put in measures in the field for their farms and for their animals. So this course was primarily designed to help the veterinarians and the paraprofessionals help farmers to protect their animals. But like I said, it's not a very technical course. We are not teaching you veterinary medicine. So if you're an animal owner or a farmer, this course is still very, very useful for you. So I think I've answered those questions. Just to reiterate, it is free and it is online. You just have to register with the information that we've provided.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy, and especially for emphasizing that not only is the course available or relevant to veterinarians, but other people like animal owners, for those ones who are asking in the comment box. We also have other questions. There's an anonymous question asking, is the course applicable for people in the wildlife sector? I think because of the pictorials, a lot of it was emphasized on farm animals such as cows and goats, but is the course applicable to people in the wildlife sector? There's also another anonymous question. Before a disaster, how can an animal owner prepare? You know, sometimes the government announces that there's going to be heavy rains and there's a likelihood of floods, and animal owners often do not know what to do. What advice would you give to any animal owner here on how they can prepare ahead of a disaster? Some people are saying that they have heard that animals can sense disasters. So how can animal owners sense or pick some of these signs and prepare in advance? Thank you, Judy. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you all. Even if you're anonymous, it would be nice for you to share your first name, but your questions are very, very interesting. Let me take the first one about the wildlife sector. Now, this course is very, very relevant, and it includes all animals, including wildlife. It is an entry-level course for disaster response teams. And we use these same protocols when we are dealing with wildlife emergencies. Only December last year and January this year, and even currently, we as a global disaster response teams have been actively involved in the Amazon fires, specifically rescuing wildlife. And in the recent Australia fires, we've also been involved in rescuing wildlife. So this course prepares all veterinary response teams to deal with all cadres of animals, livestock, companion animals, and by companion animals, we mean your pets, birds, like your exotic birds, your parrots and others, and also wildlife, all categories of wildlife. It probably, the only category that it doesn't go into details is the animals in the ocean or aquatic animals. You'll need more specialized training for that. So how can farmers prepare for a disaster? Yes, the government announces that we are getting into a very heavy rain season. And I'm an animal owner, I have animals in my farm, and I'm worried because I'm normally in a flood zone. The course will take you through some of this, but just to give you some advice, what we advise farmers is that when there's an early warning, or you know that the rains are going to come, you need to check the topography or the land layout of your farm. If you are in a low-lying area, it's important to move your animals to a higher level or a higher land. If you can move them to relatives or to another farm or somewhere else, this is the #1 way to protect your animals from floods. Another way that you should protect them is ensure that they're dewormed early, because one of the greatest concerns we come across, or problems we come across during flood seasons or cyclones, is that 3 weeks or so after the cyclone event or the flood event, animals are attacked by a lot of worms, a lot of ectoparasites, ticks, and insects. So to protect against that, we need to deworm. So if your vet is not around, or you don't have access to one, after the rain event, please ensure that you deworm your animals. If you are unable to move for whatever reason, or you're unable to evacuate your animals ahead of a flood and move them to higher ground, away from flood lanes or even from bursting of banks, please untether your animals. Do not leave them tied to a pole, a tree, or locked in a barn for any reason. If you're concerned that they'll be stolen, this is not the time to be concerned about them being stolen. You'd rather have them stolen than dead. Because we know, yes, like someone mentioned, animals have a good sense of danger, because their senses are more prepped than ours. We have a bigger brain, so we need to see danger, while many animals smell it and feel it and are able to act upon it, because they're more in touch with their senses and with nature. So if you leave your animals untethered, they're able to run away and escape, and it gives them a surviving chance. So we always encourage farmers and animal owners, if you're going to have a cyclone, a flood, anything like that, do not tie your dog, do not tie your cow on a tree or a pole, or leave them locked in some sort of barn or something like that. Give them a fighting chance. To speak a bit more about, do animals have senses? Actually, this is an area that has not been very well researched. But we know from anecdotal information, and in fact from ancient communities like the Japanese, they used to monitor the behavior of animals to know when there's an imminent earthquake. It's been observed that when there's an imminent earthquake and there's tremors on the earth, probably even just before our own machines pick up these tremors, if they're available, animals sense the tremors in the ground. And what they do is that they start climbing to the surface. So if they're burrowing animals like snakes or insects, they start climbing to the surface. If they're cats or chicken, they start trying to climb up trees. They try to perch up on roofs. And while we humans have not really learned how to read these signs, if you see very many animals behaving very strangely suddenly, let it be a quick early warning that there's something happening, that their senses are picking up something that our senses cannot pick up. Actually, in flood disasters, I've been involved in quite a lot. What always shocks me is that the death count in humans is much higher than the death count in animals, where animals are free roaming, like in a lot of our traditional African setup, where we have our animals not really tied up. Why is this? Animals are able to sense a flood, they're able to sense something is coming and disappear, and unfortunately leave us there, as we only see the water with our eyes, and that by that time it's too late and we become victims of it. So any other question, Beth? I hope I've answered your questions.
We hope so. So we'll take the final set for the typed questions, and then we'll give an opportunity to anyone who'd like to ask their questions verbally. So kindly raise your hand and I will give you the opportunity to unmute and ask your question. So we have a question from James, Ntema, and Chris. James from Sierra Leone, Ntema from South Africa, and Chris from Zambia. They're all asking, is there any plans for World Animal Protection to partner with university to include Prepvet in their curriculum? We also have a question from Victor in Kenya. He's saying, just recently we had a unique disaster. Animals ate food that had poisons in them. So that kind of unique kind of disaster, how would animal owners possibly respond to that? And there's also another question, if there are any plans to streamline this course outside the digital space, just because there are those people who give care to animals but are not necessarily connected to the internet and possibly can't take the course online. And finally, if there are any plans to share this PowerPoint presentation in soft copy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, James from Sierra Leone, and Chris from Zambia, and Maseru, I hope I got your name right, from South Africa. The Prepvet course, what do we plan, how do we plan to integrate this into universities? We've actually been in discussions with Malawi in terms of getting the course in. Now there are two levels of course, let me clarify. We have what you call the Veterinary Emergency Response Unit, which is ideal for a classroom setting, and that is what we are encouraging our veterinary schools to adapt. The Prepvet online course is an add-on, because as you know, or probably maybe you may not be aware, you really cannot become a disaster response expert simply through theory. You must practice, you must have a hands-on experience, and you must go out to disasters. So for sure, the in-class training is very important. And in that light, we've been discussing with universities in certain countries. I will not mention their name, but I'll mention Malawi because those discussions have progressed forward. We've had discussions maybe because you're from Zambia with your university in Zambia, very in the early stages. And the plan we hope this year is that we can have both of those courses integrated, depending on how fast they can do so, both the Veterinary Emergency Response Unit and Prepvet to be available to veterinarians in your region. So if you have a way you can help in the process, please get in touch with me. We would like to see this being rolled out for the better part of the year in other courses, in other universities besides the University of Nairobi across Africa. Our objective as World Animal Protection is to make it accessible to you in various platforms, in class, through universities, through continuous professional development trainings outside the university setting, and online, like we have done with Prepvet. There's the other question about, I think I've answered other ways you can learn this if you don't have access to the digital platform. Please get in touch with your local university and encourage them to have a conversation with us and set it up. We are giving it free to universities as well. So if they have an online platform, the veterinary schools in those universities, middle level colleges that do any training in animal production, animal husbandry, this course we are making available free even to those institutions. And we want as many of them to take it up. So if you're watching and you are working or have access or influence around or with these institutions, please get in touch with us and we will move the process forward with them. So I think I've answered the questions. We will be sharing the presentation, absolutely. We will share the presentation after this live webinar.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. We have Dixon Tayebwa. You'd like to ask a question. Kindly tell us where you're from and go ahead to ask your question. Dixon?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Kindly tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Dixon and I'm speaking from Makerere University in Uganda. And my question is simply, Uganda, we have sort of had quite a period where most times we have been stable and no kinds of disasters. But in just this year, you know, the COVID came in and hit the whole world. And aside from that, recently we had the locusts that hit the northern part of the country. And other than the locusts, recently we had Lake Victoria and most of the lakes flooding and then driving people and communities out of their homesteads. And if you combine all those disasters, we have reached the peak beyond what we could possibly manage. And I have encountered cases, of course, as a practicing veterinarians, where you find farmers who are struggling to survive themselves. And then, I mean, if a person is struggling to survive, then what is left for the animals? Does this cause, or is there a section that talks about maybe when we talk about humane slaughter or disposal of the animals? Because an example is the breeders for poultry. They were supplying chicks, and all of a sudden there was a lockdown, and then they are stuck with all these chicks. I mean, what then happens to them? Is there?
All right, Dixon. Yes, I'm sure we got your question. We'll move to the next person. Tumwebaze, if I'm saying your name right, could you please tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question? Tumwebaze Godfrey? All right, looks like we lost him there.
Hello.
Eric, oh, okay, is that you, Godfrey?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, please ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, I've been following. I'm from Uganda and I'm a journalist. I work with Salt Media. I would like to know if that course could provide the skills to journalists who normally cover such animal disasters. Because as you've had my friend from Accra University in Uganda, we have a lot of disasters, as he mentioned before. But sometimes it's very hard for journalists to cover when they are not skilled. So does the course provide the skills on how to cover such disasters? And again, do you have maybe head offices, or do you partner with some universities in Uganda where we can access that course? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that. Yusuf Dima, kindly tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question. Yusuf? All right. Eric Sasia?
Hello.
Yes, please tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question. Thank you.
Oh, good. My name is Eric Sasia. I'm from Kenya. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, kindly go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, good. Now, my question is in regard to conservation. We have remotely located field rangers, of course, and remotely located communities. So my question is, if one undertakes this course, is it proper for someone to, informally hand over that skill set or that knowledge to the remotely located people who would not have, internet access or computers or phones?
All right, thank you so much. And we'll now take the final question. Chris, kindly tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question. Chris? Hello, Chris?
I'm getting you.
Yes, please tell us where you're from and go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much. I'm in Zambia, Lusaka. And my question is, are you sending us a timetable for this, or we shall be expecting to get the notifications on the media or through emails? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. That is the last verbal question we'll take for this session. Any other questions, kindly write to us and we'll endeavor to answer you. Back to you, Judy.
Thank you very much, Beth. And it's very exciting to hear that Africa is here. This course is for us. Let's prepare ourselves as veterinarians. Let me go straight into some of the questions, and I hope I cover most of them. Dixon from Makerere University, you mentioned that Uganda has previously not had to deal with too many disasters, but this year things changed and you had one on top of the other. And it's usually a challenge even as a veterinarian, first of all, getting the right skill set. We are cognizant of the fact that during our time, we didn't learn disaster management or advanced animal welfare concepts in university. But now we as veterinarians are being called upon by our animal owners, our farmers, to help them. And the course, first of all, equips you to be able to give very low cost solutions to your farmers. Now, in my experience and in our experience here, the things that farmers need to do, and we are talking about our resource challenged farmers, it's not expensive solutions. If a farmer knows that where he has located his chicken house is at a place where when it rains, water will tend to go down or to enter the chicken house, a simple change of relocating that chicken house, even if it's a traditional house, or even raising the chicken house so that it sits above the ground, will save their chickens. We recently saw that in Makweni in 2018, where a farmer had built his wooden chicken house to protect it from rodents and snakes and from the harsh sun, which was in that particular region. Then suddenly this year, there was very heavy rains and they hadn't quite thought about rains as a hazard. So the rains came and created, you know how rains create small rivers all over the place, but in their compound, it created a small river that went straight through the door of the chicken house and all the chickens were drowned. So the lesson learned for the unfortunate and sad lesson for that chicken, he lost about 30, 40 chicken in that incident, which is a lot for a small holder, is that when you are constructing your chicken house, you need to consider the risks that your chicken are exposed to beyond disease, beyond rats and rodents and snakes. You need to consider if a natural hazard occurs like floods, where have I located my chicken house and how can I best to protect them? So my point is, the course, first of all, equips the veterinarian to begin to think about these things. Most of the things are low cost, easy access for farmers, and then you can help your farmer. I hope I've answered your question. And being from Makerere University, please get in touch with us. Personally, I've been in discussion with your chair board, the Uganda Veterinary Board, and we've been talking for a long time about getting Veru and Prepvet into Makerere University. So please get in touch with us. We want to see it rolled out in a big way in Uganda. For Josephat, you talked about, if I'm not wrong, what does a course cover media? The course is really designed for practitioners and for animal owners. If you're an animal owner or a practitioner or someone who deals with animals, touches animals directly, yes. However, we have our communication team that has worked with journalists to train them on how to cover all animal welfare aspects that we deal with. This is disasters are included, farming issues, wildlife issues, and companion animals. So the short answer is yes, absolutely, but not within Prepvet itself. Get in touch with us. And if you're a journalist, we will link you up to our communication team, which will be able to work with you on how to report animal welfare and disaster management issues out in the field, because we do recognize that there has been a gap, and where we have supported and trained journalists, we have seen a huge improvement of how journalists are supporting report, number one, and how they also support farmers and animal owners to better prepare. So yes, and absolutely get in touch with us. Eric from Kenya talks about conservation. And if he learns the course, can he become a trainer of trainer and train field-related field rangers? I think this is related to an earlier question. what other modes of access of this training are there beyond or besides digital or in class? So my short answer is, hopefully maybe in the future we can download this course. Right now it's not downloadable from the online. It's not set up to be downloaded. If it was, you probably can encourage those people to read the course materials, but we will take that up as a challenge. We do know that many people have requested if they can download it. It's not set up to be downloaded. How confident you would feel going through the course and training others and they be confident in it is I'll leave it up to you. I'm assuming you're a veterinarian, and probably it will be better than nothing. I can tell you that. Any knowledge we can pass to those around us, our family, our colleagues, is going to be helpful. Chris from Lusaka talks about certification and a timetable. Now the course is automated. So every time you do a module, you'll do a quiz. And if you fail the quiz, it does not allow you to move on. You need to go back to the course module material and review to answer all the questions correctly. At the end of that, all the 13 modules, it then allows you to print out a certificate. We here, it's a very simple certificate, but we here in Africa, once you've completed, and we can see so from our system, from our backend, we will give you a much more detailed certificate which has a transcript behind. And you can use this to apply for your continuous development points in your respective country, to improve your job outlook, to increase your knowledge, and even to show others that you've done this course. Like I said, it's a global course. So anywhere you say you have done Prepvet, they'll recognize what you have covered under Prepvet. So I hope I have answered all your questions. If I have not, please, like Beth said, write to us, get in touch with us. We will be more than happy to continue any of these conversations. But one thing I'd like to say is that we really look forward to seeing you on Prepvet, to supporting you. We chose to do this first webinar as an awareness. Now that you're aware, we hope to have subsequent webinars really diving into some of those issues that probably you have brought up, or aspects of the course that you'd like some more guidance on information. So more technical webinar. This one has been a promotional webinar and an awareness webinar. So thank you very much for your attention, Africa, wherever you may be. Please, as veterinarians, let's equip ourselves to better serve our animals, to better serve our farmers in this era of climate change and climate emergencies, and to ensure that we are protecting the welfare of our animals, because as you know, disasters really goes against all the welfare principles. An animal suffers in the worst way possible, and even many lose their lives. And we can see those numbers go down if we ourselves are equipped on how to handle a disaster, like I said, before, during, and after. So thank you very much. I'll hand over back to Beth.
Thank you very much, Judy, for your great presentation. Very well detailed indeed. And thank you all of you from all over Africa for attending this webinar, for your attendance, your participation, for your registration. We truly and deeply appreciate. As I mentioned, we were not able to answer all of your questions, but kindly write back to the email that wrote to you what question you might have. Even before you leave this meeting, you can leave your question in the comment box, and we'll endeavor to answer you even after this. As we end this webinar, there will be a survey that will pop up on your screen. I encourage you to kindly give us feedback so that we ensure your experience next time is even better. The journalists who are in this webinar, kindly stay behind. Judy will be open to answer your questions for about 10 to 15 minutes. Hopefully that will help you create your stories even after this. So finally, as we close, I will pop up the last poll. Kindly take your time to answer the questions in the poll, and we'll see you next time in the next webinar. Do have yourself a lovely weekend and rest of the week. Thank you. Over now to the journalists in this session. Kindly put up your hand if you have a question for Judy. Please mention your name and the media house you're coming from. Thank you very much. We'll start with Casita Gerald, if I'm saying your name correctly. Gerald, Casita, kindly go ahead and ask your question. Gerald. Okay, looks like Gerald is not ready. Saul Chemonges.
I'm here.
Yes, kindly go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, now, my name is obviously Saul Chebonges from, you can see a Ugandan who went to Makerere University myself. And yeah, I practice veterinary medicine in Brisbane, Australia. And thank you again, Dr. Judy Kimaru, and your team for this fantastic presentation. And I've said an old Makerere University student with significant experience in veterinary emergency medicine. Now, you've already answered certain questions, you know, like whether we can convince Makerere University to have this into their curriculum. So I probably don't have a question, but it's now a commentary because, yeah, I think you've answered lots of things, and that was a very high quality presentation that I'm very happy with. And yeah, so things like bushfires that we experienced, yeah, we're right into it. And not only the bushfires, but in Australia here, we see lots of animal disasters that don't actually get reported, and particularly road accident victims. And animals that, you know, trucks roll over. You find like thousands of chickens, you know, running out of tracks when they collide. So as I mentioned, that is just a commentary, and these are things that we might probably learn from, you know, experiences of other colleagues who have traveled elsewhere as well. So thank you again, guys.
All right, thank you so much. I can see Casita is ready. Casita, kindly go ahead and tell us where you're from and ask your question. Casita Gerald. Oh, okay. Let's go to Bahola Buya. Kindly tell us where you're from, which media house you're representing, and kindly ask your question.
I'm not a media personality.
Okay, it's fine, but you can go ahead and ask your question. Tell us where you're from and ask your question.
Okay, I'm a wildlife management student from Kenya Wildlife Service Training Institute. And I have seen a number of times that I've seen animals being run over by vehicles, and it feels bad, and you're really in a situation you want to help, but there is nothing you can do. And I want to know how we should handle such kind of a circumstance when we've seen such kind of an incident.
All right, thank you, Bahola. We'll go to Tumwebaze, I see you're back. Kindly go ahead and ask your question, Tumwebaze.
Okay, thank you. I want to once again to thank Dr. Judy Kimalu for a very good conversation that we had. I'm a journalist. I'm in Uganda and I work for Salt Media. I just want to know the qualifications, academic qualifications that you consider before joining that course, because I'm not a veterinary student, but I'm so much interested in covering the nature. So I want to know the academic qualifications that someone needs to be having before joining the course. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Tumwebaze. I can see Sol Chemonges.
That was the one before. Sorry, I probably pressed it twice.
Okay. No worries. So Judy, maybe you can take that up first.
Okay, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Bohala. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. If not, my apologies. I really empathize with your situation, and I personally feel very bad when I see wildlife that have been victims of various things, and notwithstanding road accidents or road kills. So in Kenya, let me speak specifically to Kenya, because in many African countries, the legal situation around wildlife is such that it's a responsibility of Kenya Wildlife Services legally to deal with wildlife. But you as a concerned citizen, you can do something. But I want to probably caution you, because as much as it's an emotive situation and you want to rush in and help the animal, remember wildlife, if the wild animal is not yet dead, it could still be very dangerous and it can attack you. It's been injured, it's fearful, and it can cause more harm to you, and even grievous and deadly infections can be passed to you. So I would recommend, if you're in Kenya, to call KWS. They have veterinarians, and they themselves, if they cannot physically come, they'll be able to advise you what to do. I can see you're a student, so probably in the future you'll be one of those rangers who will also have the authority to physically do something. The idea is to get that animal, like any other animal, to a veterinarian where they can access help and veterinary help. They need veterinary help, and they need to be in a specialized veterinary clinic to do so. So again, let me repeat, call KWS, have their veterinarians come or their rangers come and transport and translocate that animal to a veterinary facility that is equipped to handle wildlife so that that animal can get help. We don't normally encourage lay people to deal with wildlife directly. There are lots of issues around that, in notwithstanding welfare and disease issues. So call the professionals in. The other name is harder for me, Tumbewaze from Salt Lake Media in Uganda. What qualifications do you need to do Prepvet? Now, the beauty of Prepvet, it's like I mentioned, it's designed in a way that even if you're not a veterinarian or have not had prior training in disaster management, you will still learn a lot. You will learn a lot. So we do encourage you to take the course. And why do we say this? Even in health, we encourage you as an individual in health to understand your health status, to read around it, to understand how to take care of yourself and to take care of your family. It's the same in our practice in veterinary, the veterinary and the animal health, animal production practice. Even if you're not a practitioner yourself, but you deal with animals directly or indirectly, it's always a good idea to equip yourself to know something about how to protect animals or what to expect when professionals come. What do you expect that they should do for you, and what should you do ahead of time? A lot of the things that are covered in the course really are things that farmers, once they are taught, should do for themselves and only leave probably the areas of treating the animals to the veterinarian. But all other areas, everybody can benefit from learning. So we do encourage you to take the course. You will not find that it has a lot of technical things. And whatever is technical there is explained in very simple language that is easy to learn. So over to you, Beth.
All right, we'll take one final question from Naftali. Naftali Moigai, are you there? Naftali? All right, looks like she's not around. Let's just say if you have any question for the journalists, kindly write to the emails that were put up on the screen earlier, and we'll endeavor to help you with your stories even after this. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time, for attending this and participating quite actively. And we look forward to seeing you in the next webinars in the near future. Thank you all, and we have come to the end of this webinar officially.